One of the most significant deaths I experienced was Ivy Mija. Ivy was our nanny and more like a second mother to us.
One I want to share is my father-in-law. He passed away in November 2006, so it's been 11 years now. He is a person who was an orphan around the age, I want to say very little, probably like 3 or 4 years old. And his mother never remarried. She stayed single with her kids and then was able to bring them to the U.S. He had to do a lot on his own because without a father figure, it was hard. So he learned a lot on his own. He became a well-respected man in the community. He's also a leader in the community. He actually was a lead for the clan. He learned how to blow the thing, an instrument for funeral, instrument for celebration. He learned how to do that. He learned, hunting at a young age. He know a lot of the Hmong traditional.
Okay. Hi, my name is Yumi Inamata. I'm originally from Japan. I grew up there till I was 18. I would say the most significant death for me up to this point is my own father. And maybe second is my grandmother, who basically are a caretaker when I was young. But for the most, I would say my father, because that chronologically that happened earlier in my life. My father had been sick and basically got a phone call saying he fell in critical condition, and my mom said, just do you know that happened? And she didn't even say come home, but like, what are you talking about? I'm coming home now. And then by the end of I landed, he was already gone.
I'm mixed race. As colored people, or mixed race people in Zimbabwe are labeled colored. In the colored community, when somebody dies, typically there's a week-long gathering of the family, typically at the house of the person who has died, and their loved ones will simply be present to grieve together with family members who come and visit. And they bring food for all 3 meals of the day, breakfast, lunch, and supper. And for the whole week, really the family stops everything in their life to simply be together, to share food, and to share stories about the person who has died. I loved this as a child when my grandmother died, my great-grandmother died, or any significant family member died, because many of my cousins would come to Harare from Bulawayo, the city in the south, or from South Africa even, to come and share in this week-long celebration, grief, shared meals, shared stories. And it was usually the week in preparation before the funeral itself, so that the funeral itself was a climax to a whole week of being together, and it became a celebration. A culmination of the time we spent together.
But over time, I've lost people that are close or people that we know in the community, because when funeral comes, it's also a community gathering too. And they may not be closely related, but if it's distance, you still go and show support or respect. And so when funeral come, it's about community gathering. Right after the person passed away, to the funeral can be weeks or almost a month, because we're waiting for a funeral home to host the body. During that wait, people, family, relatives will come and be with the family, cook meals on the weekend, just be in the presence of the family that's grieving. The time from the death to when the funeral happens, that gives the family time to really prepare everything to and prepare their heart is the most important thing is to
well, because basically people show up from the company my dad worked for since 18 to 50 something. So basically entire his work professional life he worked for one company, and that's very no longer that's true, but it used to be that's the case for any Japanese workers. So that I just really how even the people from the office helped out those kind of clerical works for the funerals and stuff like was amazing. The people, I mean, his co-workers and mentors and younger folks who came and just made a time to talk to my mom about it or talk to me or something like that. That was something that I learned that different side that I never knew of him. So I would say, yeah, that was
Ivy was Shona, and in the Shona culture in Zimbabwe, when someone dies, typically the whole village will come together to mourn and to grieve together for about a week. And this is where the mbira players, it's the thumb piano is the traditional instrument. The mbira player has an intercessory role where playing the mbira, they bring messages from the ancestors and they sing these messages to the grieving people, and they welcome the spirit of the one who has died into this sort of communion of ancestors who they act as these musical intercessory beings. When I was 8 years old, my great-grandmother passed away, and as a small child I didn't know how to make meaning of this, but I do remember her funeral. The ritual of her funeral is vivid in my memory. She was a staunch Anglican, and I remember at the back of the church her casket was there, and the priest in these beautiful vestments and the thurifer with the incense and all of these flowers, and the opening sentences, I am the resurrection and I am the life. And I just remember the smell of the incense, the smell of the flowers. It was a bright sunny morning. It was just a beautiful ritual that was imprinted on me as a small child, that death really wasn't anything terrifying. It was actually quite beautiful.
And so our Hmong funerals are quite interesting and big, and it goes on for 3 days. So it starts from a Friday, goes through a Monday. In funeral, men have specific roles that have to be trained or have to learn to do. They would have to learn all the ways of chanting with either words or the instrument qing, and then the person that plays the drum. You need to be connected to know all those things to be able to guide the person. So in the old tradition, the animist, they use that to guide the dead to the spiritual ancestral way, or to their placenta. Or my father-in-law knew all that too. You had to be gifted to learn all that. Not every Hmong man can do that. When he passed away in 2006, we had a Christian funeral for him. They converted in about 1975 to around in 1980 there. So we had a Christian funeral. My father-in-law was a well-respected person in the community and one of the leaders in the clan, so people were visiting all hours, and so we were there. On a Friday, we'll have 2 services. We'll have one in the morning and one in the afternoon. In the morning, we usually start with the chanting and sending of the spirit, sending his spirit back to God where it had come from. And we do chanting of the saints, guiding him, being with him, and sending him. So that first service will be, it's the sending or releasing his spirit back to God and where it came from. And then the night would just be continued prayer service for him, for the individual, and then for the family itself too.
So that I think a lot of people tends to have those funeral and so forth is at the gathering places or funeral home nowadays, because we just don't have a capacity to have so many people in individual resident. But I heard it used to be so that people passed away in the house, and that's how they lay, overnight or 2 nights and so forth. Then that people come and pay respect that way. But I think then by the end of funeral, I think people send off the body to go to have it cremated. And while we wait, that is happening. Usually we have a feast or some lunch all together, friends, usually really close friends and families.
Even for a month, the family would continue to be visited with food by extended family members. Widows or widowers would wear black as a symbol of their grief for a whole year. And they would change out of the black that they would wear for a year on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of their loved one's death, into colorful clothing to sort of celebrate the end of their mourning process, and that they were ready to move on. But it's typically a week.
Then I think that's 49th day in Buddhism. That is the day that the people who left this world, no, they were floating this world. And 49th day is the day that they become little Buddha, so that they will cross over to higher world. So we do have a little get together. Usually families go to the graveyard. Ashes has been kept in the house usually, so that's when we sort of like put into the family grave. So basically until 49 days those spirits are floating around in this world, just gradually learning the accepting that they are no longer here with us. Then that's the day that they become one of the higher spirit to move on to the next level. First year, barely following year, somehow considers as 3rd year, 7th year, I think, 14th year, 13th year, 17th year. Those significant numbers are supposedly based on the Buddhism. Also, that probably times I get to see my cousins and so forth, so that I don't know, sometimes focus changes, but I think it's a part of life. It's good to have that sort of like reconnect with the people and go, the families, and go on. And in large way, that's helpful for who passed away and become our ancestors, and that's their way of share of making sure that like family member who still left here to somewhat get along okay and have the moment as a family or something like that, or clown or something like that.
Music, as a child growing up, I spent most of my Saturdays either singing weddings or funerals. Many funerals, I would sing Schubert's setting of the Ave Maria. Why this is significant ritually is the words of the Hail Mary has this idea of the Mother God who is receiving her beloved child and is praying for them at the hour of death. And I remember a lot of people, the sound of Schubert's music, the arpeggios, there's this very calming aesthetic in the music that helps people ritually know that their loved one is being embraced and loved by this motherly, loving presence into eternity.
For my case, it's not maybe grieving, but the moment that was really helpful for me to feel better or felt relief from it or somehow got saved was actually when I was telling about everything, how it happened to my friend. And she wasn't the closest friend, but she cried I mean, no, she didn't sob, but like while we were talking, I see that tears came up her eyes, and that was just seeing that was more moving, or like what's the word, catalysis for me, that someone who imagined what I went through is actually crying. And that, just seeing that was really helpful. Oh, okay, this is something that I could also cry too, or I can be sad about it. And just to realize that the moment was, for me personally, was really helpful. But that happened after I came back to Minnesota. So
With these funeral, I feel like the first day it might have not hit me. Maybe the second day it's starting to be like, okay, it's almost time for burial. Am I ready? It helps me, I think, to be able to build up that courage to let go on that Monday, the final, when they're resting home. I've have friends where I've gone to English funerals where 2 hours of visitation, now it's done. I'm like, that's it? I'm like, oh, okay. So I have friends that I've gone and visit, but then I'm like, that's all you have is 2 hours of service and the visitation open, and then whatever happens after that. And so I feel like few hours. I don't know if I have enough time to even process that person is gone.
It's typically a week, a month of gathering around story and meals, and then for a whole year that sort of continues. So it's a much longer process. I think in the United States, the grief process is extremely, you're expected to deal with the funeral arrangements, do the funeral the next day, and go back to work on the third day as if, nothing has changed. And I think something so quick doesn't allow us to fully appreciate what the significance and the meaning of that now changed relationship is all about.
I do feel that our process helps me to do that.
yeah.
Even from the day of death to the funeral, I have all that time, like cry my eye out or just cry, because to feel that, to go through that process. But if you like die today and 3 days later, like you won't see them anymore. But then with ours, it's like you have now until the funeral to process, and then you'll still see their body. But then it's like, okay, it's time for me to let go and to move on, to grow up. Now I no longer have this person in my life. What do I do? How do I move beyond this? So
Dominus tecum, benedicta tu